This is Primitive Outfitting, and you are listening to The Gritty Bowman.
Chicken, wow, wow.
Wow.
Nice.
And I'm not standing on my high horse saying I shoot a self bow, because there's no way in hell I'm shooting a self bow. When I say that, I mean that in a good Christian way.
As far as Cecil goes with me, I mean, I could really give a crap about that lion too much.
And all I was looking at was the tip of Aron's arrow. And it was like this and this, and then it was kind of shaking, and then it went boom, solid like a rock. And I'm like, oh.
He's like, I got to know if you hit anything or not. You never really show excitement, because I don't. I'm kind of always mellow. And this thing, ready to jerk a tear. I was running around like an idiot. Woo! You know, if you ever talk to anybody from Africa, they're all about hunting lions because they eat people. Yeah. The compound, I have total confidence. With this thing, I'm like, yeah, maybe. But the way that America works, we're so soft, like softer than baby. All of us, basically.
The shooting errors, I'm going to call it Matrix effect. I panicked.
It really, all we were trying to get is you pick up a gun, your chance of success is much higher than with a stick bow.
Yeah, it goes back down to fair chase, right?
Yeah.
When you talk fair chase, if you're giving the animal the greatest chance of escape,
Bring a self bow.
Yeah. Right? That's giving the animal the best chance of matching wits with you and escaping.
Yeah. We weren't crapping on rifles. We were just being realistic to the fact that it's easier to kill stuff with a gun, and that's just straight up, the facts. I mean, that's just how it is.
The flip side to the self bow is, it's the ultimate fair chase option. It's also probably the highest wounding option.
Yeah.
Like percentage of shots taken to wounding.
We have a saying at our house that I try to live by. It goes like this: say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean. On our recent podcast, The Technology and Hunting Debate, episode 188, we meant what we said, but we didn't really say what we meant. If this is confusing you, you're not alone, and that's why Aron and I recorded this new episode, to clear the air, to set the record straight, to say what we mean. On this episode, we talk about fair chase, something we failed to call out in our previous discussion. We clarify some of our thoughts and ideas on gun hunting, bow hunting, trapping, and baiting. We received a lot of great feedback on episodes 187 and 188. Mostly, we heard from hunters who feel strongly about fair chase hunting practices, which is noble and encouraging. These hunters would like to see long-time hunting traditions like hound hunting, trapping, and baiting go away, preferring to see animals hunted on more difficult terms. Aron and I greatly value fair chase. That is one reason why we bow hunt, to afford our quarry with the greatest chance of escape.
Like baiting seems to be out of favor in trapping in a lot of, not just non-hunting communities, but in hunting communities as well. Now, to me, again, we're ignoring the practical side of wildlife management.
Right.
Of the world we live in, the real life world we live in, which to me, when you're dealing with trapping, let's take wolves in Idaho, for example. Idaho Fish and Wildlife, the biologists have established quotas for how many wolves they want taken out of the wolf population every year, so that their elk herds and their deer herds and stuff and other animals are not wiped out.
And they have trappers trapping for the state, not just hunters.
And that's what I was about to say is,
it seems that we are completely ignoring the practical side of wild game management. If we can't meet management quotas on bears using spot and stalk hunting techniques, should we simply let them grow unchecked? What about wolves? We hope this podcast clarifies our ideas on technology, fair chase, and ethics, and gets you thinking more about all the issues surrounding it. Some of you felt that Aron and I went too far by actually saying the names of the people in the hunting community that we were talking about. Well, it's not really our style to stay quiet. We're open books. We share the good, the bad, and the ugly about everything we do. Our goal is to say what we mean and mean what we say, and sometimes it gets a little gritty. Our intention is to have open and honest dialogue about the issues that affect hunting. It does us no good to shy away from difficult conversations. and I'm a firm believer that we can disagree on various issues and still respect one another. Disagreement does not mean disrespect. As Tim Ferriss says, success can be measured by the number of difficult conversations you're willing to have.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Gritty Bowman podcast. Aron and I have
Got a lot of feedback from the listeners. Yeah,
a lot of great feedback from listeners, in fact, on this topic of technology and hunting.
Yeah.
And, you know, talking about recurves, bows, and rifles, and the various methods of hunting. And we wanted to clarify a few things that, you know, have come up in these questions. And one of the
good questions,
really good questions, really great feedback, great discussion going on. One of the things that came out of it was that we wanted to clarify too was when Ranella was talking to Joe Rogan on the podcast, he never said that it was unethical to use a radio, to use two-way communication. In fact, he shied away from declaring it was ethical at all. Really, it's something that we didn't bring up in any of the earlier podcasts that we should have brought up, and that is the question of fair chase.
Yeah.
That's where we didn't clarify very well in that. What is fair chase? Because what Ranella was talking about when he was talking about radios was really not about ethics. It was really about fair chase.
Yeah.
Do radios give you an unfair advantage in the taking of game?
And most of the places where we said ethical, you could have shoot in fair chase.
Right. And that is sort of the, you know, we as hunters, we tend to blend the two. Because there is a correlation, you know.
Yeah, I'm horrible about blending them. Yeah,
yeah, because when we're talking fair chase, there are many of us and and hunters in general that feel that if it's not fair chase, it's not ethical.
Yep.
Right. So if it's too easy, if the animal doesn't have a reasonable chance of escape, then it's just high fence hunting.
Basically,
you're shooting something that's in a cage.
100% success or whatever. Yeah.
So in that regard, it's no longer hunting. It's raising cattle or whatever.
Is where we came up, you know, where I had brought up, you know, using a radio compared to shooting it at 300 yards.
Right.
You know, where's the fair chase line drawn or whatever.
Right. And that's really what brought up the discussion is fair in the realm of fair chase. There are certain things like, for example, using radios that for me, you know, I'm like, yeah, does it give the animal a better chance of escape if you don't use radios? Yes. But then other times, a guy like Steve, all we were saying was Steve was okay with using a rifle.
Yeah.
Which from a bow hunting background that we have, it does feel like that doesn't give you as much fair chase as radios would give you more fair chase in a bow than a rifle.
Right. And my perspective on this is if you want to get to the root of it, you just take a recurve or a self bow out, and that's the fairest chase of all. But then the harvest statistics can get pretty screwed up pretty quick. Mm-hmm. But you take a guy with a recurve and a radio, or a couple guys with a recurve and a radio, and a guy with a rifle. I would, you know, say that the guy with the rifle is going to be, you know, have a little bit better odds at 300 yards. So, and that's where it gets really sticky about the fair chase or ethical, however you want to word it, and drawing certain lines in the sand. You can cross them pretty quick in other ways. So,
yeah, we did get a lot of emails from guys saying, for example, and they were great emails, very, very great points that were brought up, but quite a few who said, you know, look, baiting is wrong.
Yeah.
On all these levels because you don't learn husbandry, you know, you don't learn animal husbandry. You don't really learn about animals, how they live and move and behavior, and you don't really bond with the outdoors the same way as you do if you don't have bait at your disposal. Other examples were out there as well about if you have a recurve or a traditional bow, you know, then you really understand how hard it is and you give the animal the best chance of escape, right? We're talking about reducing technology or tools that we have at our disposal to harvest game. Now, there's a practical side that people seem to overlook.
They definitely, I mean, from the feedback I got, it was completely overlooked. That was not brought up on any messages that I got at all. The practical side, this harvest ratio statistics, the business side of things for the Department of Wildlife in each state, that gets completely overlooked. And for me, if you made everybody carry a recurve around, there'd be a lot of deer and elk getting hit. Bears. I mean, California is a good
by
example
cars.
of that. By cars, yeah, getting run over. No bait, and then you're paying people to go shoot.
Yeah, let's take an example for example, California, where they've effectively banned hunting bears and cougars, period. I mean, that's about as, that's not the same as removing a baiting.
Yeah.
Or removing hey, you cannot use rifles to hunt bears anymore.
And you can hunt bears. You can't run them with dogs now in California. You can hunt them. You can hunt bears.
Can't use bait.
You can't use bait. You can still hunt bears, spot and stalk or whatever, but they did outlaw running them with dogs. Mm-hmm. That's where you're going to start to see the bear population skyrocket, because it's not that easy to kill a bear anyway to begin with. So.
And talking to South Cox, he's been there firsthand and witnessed the whole thing, and the black-tailed deer population, as a result, has severely suffered because of the lack of hunting on bears and cougars, right? So there's a cost to be paid when you decide to restrict a hunting method that's effective.
Yeah,
that population of animals will survive. Will thrive.
Thrive, yeah. Pigs are a good example of that. When you don't weed out like pigs,
yep,
they just overrun everything. In the mountain lion population in California, Oregon, and Washington is a problem. Mm-hmm. Oregon specifically, in areas that I used to hunt, they give away a ton of deer tags there too. But it's just the calf population just crushes the deer.
And when you say, okay, we're going to take away bear baiting, let's say. And there was a gentleman who wrote into us, awesome email, but he's like, look, I don't use bait. For the last 6 years, I've shot 4 bears out of 6 years, and some with a recurve, and I didn't use bait.
And he's from here,
right? And he's in Colorado. So, and to that, I'm like, that's a super cool achievement. That's a really great accomplishment. Mm-hmm. But not everybody has that discipline, or as skilled or whatnot.
Or quite honestly, here, I would assume, I'm not going to call off units, but there's specific units here in Colorado that the bear population is just through the roof right now. And you'll see multiple bears a day. And canisters have to be used now for backpacking, and the population is a problem of bears.
And so but the flip side to that is to insist that everyone hunt that way will mean that bears will survive.
Yep.
Period. You're going to have a higher survival rate, and you're going to have a higher population. So if Fish and Game DNR has a management quota of bears they want to pluck out of the wilderness or the wild, during each year, those quotas are not going to be met often because of the restrictions we've now employed. So what's the result of that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the case of Colorado, just because the tree huggers or whatever involved, there's also the happy-go-lucky bear, we can't shoot a bear, they're too nice issue that's going on. And now I believe that multiple people probably could kill a bear every year with a stick bow or a compound.
Because the population is at an all-time high.
Which means the elk population is going to suffer because bears like calf elk and so on and so forth. So it's an echo. There's a ripple effect farther than we probably, including me, that we realize happens when you start to say you shouldn't do this, or this isn't ethical, or this is ethical. And one of the things that Steve also brought up was eventually we will have the technology for 100% success.
Yeah, and we kind of said, Manila said, look, at some point, there's this risk that technology grows to the point where we can guarantee 100% success rate when we go out and hunt. And what will that mean to hunting and wildlife populations as a whole? And he described how, well, most likely what will happen is if you get to the point where you have 100% success because technology is allowed, then you're going to be like, okay, well, all 10 people who get a tag are going to be successful, and we need 10 taken from the population, so you get 10 tags instead of 100 tags.
Right.
We already have that technology.
That's the point is, we kind of said, well, we haven't seen a serious change in the amount of harvest rates over the years. Well, that's because, we're talking about it. And so, well, that's because we've policed ourselves.
Right. The Department of Wildlife, the hunter, each hunter. I mean,
we do have the technology today. Look at pigs.
Yeah.
You can snipe them at night. You can use night vision goggles and scopes. You can fly in a helicopter and machine gun them. There's
run them with dogs. Yeah.
There's like no rules.
Bait them.
For pigs. Bait them, trap them, poison them.
Everything.
Anything you want with a pig, sky's the limit. We have the technology today to guarantee 100% success rate. We don't use it.
Right. Well, and we're not, in my opinion, and there was some other comments where a few people had said, if it's legal, it's okay. It can be a slippery slope. Mm-hmm. I guess my point with that is, or why I say that is, I have good confidence for the most part that we as hunters, as well as the Department of Wildlife, know what they're doing to a certain degree. Not always. Sometimes they screw things up. In the sense of technology, is lighted nocks being legal in Montana going to chase the harvest ratio? I think it'll help the population because they'll find more. If you wound an animal with a lighted knock, you have a better chance to find it, flat out. It doesn't help you kill the animal. It just helps you recover the animal, which means more animals are found, which means there's less animals laying there dead that were wounded.
Or, a guy wounds it, and then he goes out and he harvests another one.
Yeah, exactly.
He actually shoots two elk instead of one.
Yeah, not that he did anything illegal, but he didn't find the first one, and it's legal to keep hunting, so he goes and hunts and kills another one. So lighted knock is good, but then you get to where you have, rangefinders on your bow, night vision, whatever the case may be.
Lighted sights.
Yeah, lighted sights. Then you're starting to...
you're using technology to increase your ability to harvest
an animal. And that is policed, I think, very well. And if it wasn't, the population of animals, of deer and elk in almost every state is better than it has ever been. Not in all cases, but for the most part, which means we're not doing a horrible job. We're doing a great job at what's ethical, what's fair chase, policing ourselves.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Well, back to kind of, it's ironic because we've talked about the stick bow thing, right? Like there are a lot of, and we know a lot personally of guys who hunt with a recurve because they love the challenge, right? Mm-hmm. And they go out and they hunt with a recurve. And in states like Montana, you can go out and hunt with a recurve for a month. And if you fail,
you get to rally.
You can rally, right?
With a gun.
So you can go back and shoot one with a gun.
Yeah.
And really that's you're playing both sides. You're like, well, I want this experience, but if I don't get it done, I'm going to go pluck that animal out with a rifle.
Gun.
Just
which I think, which you'll probably edit this out, is chicken shit. You're going to say, hey, you're going to stand on your high horse and say, I'm going to give that animal the realistic chance possible to get away from me with a stick bow. But if I suck, I'm going to grab a gun and fill the freezer anyway. I think that's kind of hypocritical. If you're I'm not saying doing it is bad. I agree with doing it and I would do it. But what I'm saying is if you're stating that you are giving that animal the fairest chase possible with a stick bow.
Yeah, and you're climbing up on an ethical high horse, moral high horse.
Yeah, but then you say, but later on I'm going to shoot it with a gun to fill my tag. It's not really, it's a bit hypocritical.
Yeah.
I think it's the right thing. Montana does it right because it helps.
I do too.
The harvest ratio, the statistics.
Yeah, absolutely. You're basically still meeting quotas, and that brings us back down to this comment. Like, at what point do we draw the line on technology? For me, I look at it, and baiting and trapping and so forth. I look at it from a very practical perspective, which is there's this whole business side and animal population management side of this equation that seems to be ignored often. Right. We have a certain number of cougars we want out of the population, certain number of bears, certain number of wolves, certain number of elk and deer. And what Fish and Wildlife experts and the state is trying to do is maximize all of these resources. Right. So we don't want all the elk eaten by wolves, because then we lose hunter opportunity and we don't maximize the dollars
the state doesn't get the money from the tags because they don't have any elk there, so they can't
right.
sell as
and
many
all
tags.
The tourists and all the traveling that comes in, it's an economic, it's a natural resource.
It's a multi-million-dollar deal.
So here you go with this situation where, okay, so we're trying to maximize all of this. Now, if you go into this equation and you're like, okay, well, I just don't like to see bears baited. I think every hunter should should just spot and stalk them. Then what happens, or cougars, let's say, the same thing. Well, what eventually will happen, because of reducing the ability to get it done, those populations keep rising and rising and rising because you've made it so difficult to harvest them.
And then the deer and elk population is going down,
and the
predator population is going up.
Exactly, and you're not maximizing the resource that's out there for financial and other uses as well, but to feed humans, which is a practical use of these resources. Now,
and then they have to pay.
That's where it gets ugly to me. Is then what happens is we go and hire state management wildlife officials to come in, and we use taxpayer dollars to actually pay them to do what we've banned, which is to go out with a night vision scope and snipe cougars and trap them.
Set up state bear baits.
Or bear baits, right, state bear baits. And so here we're like, it's okay for the state to just do all the things that we say the average person shouldn't be allowed to do.
Yep. Well, and I don't know how many state-funded bear baits I saw in Washington. It was a lot because the bears screw up the trees.
Yeah.
And so then you've got all these different bait sites that they're set up except for during hunting season. And then during hunting season, they're like, no, you can't bait. You go out and you get it done. I'm not taking sides on the bear bait thing. I'm fine if you bear bait. I have no issues with it. Mm-hmm. But what bothers me is I'm like, so we've paid some dude to fill this thing up over and over and over with bait so the bears won't screw up the trees, when we could have just allowed baiting and had a hunter go out and harvest that animal.
Instead of it being a resource that we are leveraging and using, harvesting from the environment, letting money be spent on it, instead we're going back and having it be an expense to the state.
Well, and there was another comment that, the initial hunting archery season was for primitive weapons.
Right. Instead, and that doesn't include compounds.
Right. It does not include compounds. Primitive meaning like a self bow, like we're very, very primitive, or a step above a wood bow, and very, very primitive.
Something without wheels.
Definitely something without wheels. The thing though, where it gets a little squirrely is you can't really use that in an argument. And this guy wasn't. He was super cool, the guy that made the comment. But as far as realistically now, the population of animals is higher than ever for the most part. Mm-hmm. That it's not overly easy to go kill an animal with a bow to begin with.
Right.
And so if it was meant and originally with primitive weaponry, the harvest statistics hasn't changed much with all of this technology that the compounds have now. And overall, I mean, it's not like you're looking at a 90% success ratio with a bow. It's generally between 7, 11, 15%, unless you're in a super high draw out area. So technology's not helping that much.
Yeah, and I look at it from this perspective. I mean, we joked about this the other day. We've been hunting a long time. We would love to see guys put down the rifle and go and experience the recurve, go and experience the compound, right? And if they want to go back to rifle hunting, that's cool too. But it's kind of like you want them to like eventually, you have a guy that hunts over bait, and he'll be like, you know what? I've done this before. I'm really kind of more. That was a really cool experience. Now I want to spot and stalk, right? And there's this growth as a hunter where you go from I just want to kill something, and bring meat home to I want to get to know the animal more. We likened it to fishing. It's like you said to me, you don't take your kid out and say, here's the fly rod, suck it up, get it done.
Yeah. That's a good way to never have your kid fish again.
Right. You go out to the like
bobber and the worm.
The bobber and the worm, and even to like a fish farm.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, great job. You caught a fish, which was guaranteed success.
Yep.
But eventually it would be cool if the kid like got into fishing more, could appreciate fish more, and then wanted to do it with a spinner, and then wanted to do it with,
fly rod,
a fly rod,
or whatever.
Yeah, and kind of it's part of a growth that we hope people have over time. But this idea that you can force people right into having the desire to make it as difficult as possible from the start so they get the most out of it is a bit of a naive approach to me.
Well, and we experienced it this year with the stick bow. Me hunting with a stick bow and him being with me most of the time. If you turned archery season into no compounds, just traditional bows, a lot of people that shoot with a compound would probably go to rifle. Some would stay with a stick bow. So what's the effect of that? I would have to say that the success ratio for harvest would go swirl right down the crapper during archery season. Wouldn't be where it's at. It's hard enough to kill one with a compound. Now you're going with a stick. Mm-hmm. And then in rifle season, the harvest ratio maybe go up, but there's also going to be a lot of people probably with a bad taste in their mouth because of the increased number of hunters. Nothing good comes out of that at all. The other thing is we stack the odds, as we said before, heavily in my favor for success. I had a good, physical, we're both in shape, so we go the distance. Mm-hmm. We knew animals. We knew where to go. We had a lot of time off. We had good tags, and we still struggled. And I've shot a lot of animals with a compound. So you have 10 other guys, or let's say you take 10 guys, normal bow hunters, 9 to 5 jobs, the guys just out there, not with a schedule that we have, normalist success ratio of 15%. I bet that would go down to 1%, maybe 2%. And so then the population rises, and then we pay state our tax dollars go to snipers, things like that. It's a bad deal.
And I'm so on the technology debate, the way that I see it is I think to myself, put whatever restrictions you want on hunting to make it more of a fair chase event or experience, and ban baiting or trapping if you like, and then what happens is if you're not meeting management quotas on all those animals and species, mm-hmm. then you may need to put back in some of those things that make the harvesting easier.
Oh yeah, for sure. And
because that's just a practical way of managing it, right? Because the last thing we want to do is restrict the ability to hunt to such a degree that we have to employ state wildlife officials to go in and do the killing and harvesting for us. And sadly, when they kill these cougars, they just throw them in a burn pile.
Yeah. Every now and then, if they're a good one, they'll get mounted and go in a DNR office somewhere.
But they're not sitting there actually treasuring and utilizing that resource.
And we lost money, and the state could have made money from that, which completely goes back into, obviously, wildlife habitat, things like that. The other thing to look at is if you take, talking about like the technology, the baiting, or all the different things we've looked at. Mm-hmm. Let's say it's like cardio. If 10 of us are going up to the top of the fire road, and we all have a weight limit of 50 pounds, that's where we all need to be at. But all of a sudden, Brian or Colton, you're just killing it. You need a bigger challenge. They can choose self-imposed. They can choose a higher weight. Well, I don't want to blow these guys away, so I'm going to go to 75. now he's carrying more weight, but we're still an even playing field. I think that the Department of Wildlife knows what they're doing enough to set an even keel, set the bar, even keel. And if people choose to set other restrictions, like we've said,
Like Ranella doesn't want to use radios even when they're legal.
right?
He is self-imposing
Yeah,
a more difficult challenge upon himself. You used a stick bow this year instead of a compound. You self-imposed a more difficult hunt.
right. And we did it kind of as a study. I also did it to so I could talk crap to specific few people, which it ended up turning into way more than that as time went on.
And passion. I mean, you loved it and
it's
hated
great.
it.
And hated it. And, they got a lot of, struggle stick, deadly stick, all this other goofy stuff that goes on. But I've been on the phone a lot in the last 3 to 4 days since we released the first podcast that was about compound, traditional, rifle, whatever. And then we had the technology podcast. What I'm gathering, one, is a lot of people look at things from their own set of blinders, meaning
Their own lenses.
They see things from a perspective of how they want to see it, and maybe I do as well.
We try not to.
Yeah, we specifically, I am trying not to. When I talk to these guys and about the compound traditional rifle thing, that there are a lot of comments, and I'm trying not to drift off here, of what's the right way to archery hunt, and that you didn't get it if you wished you'd had a compound in your hand during specific hunts. One of my comments to that is, I think people should just go out and hunt for the reasons they want to hunt, and it's a slippery slope to start saying again everyone should hunt with primitive weapons, because in my short-lived experience with the trad bow, the numbers will skyrocket in the population.
Harvest rates will tank.
Harvest ratio is going to go right down quickly. A few of the other things that so I don't see too many squirrels. We had a few questions that were good comments as far as maybe semantics, but verbiage on like lure, bait, what's the difference, or things like that.
We were talking about baiting versus trapping.
Right, and I was cranking out some smart aleck comments, and a guy said beavercaster's lure, and it is. It's a lure, not a bait.
Technically, that's the term used. Yeah,
and I personally lump them kind of together, and I always have. But my point is if you're a trapper and you're trapping beaver, bobcat, whatever, you're using and you're just using a lure. You're setting a trap, putting out a lure. The animal, while you're at home, walks in and steps in the trap, and then you come later, the next day or a couple days later, whatever your state laws tell you have to come back, and the animal's stuck in the trap. Now, if that is okay with you and baiting is not okay, then I would say that, okay, baiting's not okay, but so you're saying it is okay for me to lure a bear in and trap it, because you're stating it's okay to trap bobcat, beaver, things like that, but it's not okay to bait, but it's okay to trap, meaning it's okay for me to set a lure for a bear to come in on a game trail, set up a trap, go home, come back a couple of days later and find the bear stuck in the trap. I see no difference between lure and bait, was my point with that. And so the really is, okay, fair chase. None of that's overly fair to the animal. You're going home, eating a hot dog, watching whatever, The Last Ship, while the trap is left out. So it can get confusing. I personally like trapping. I don't have a problem with baiting, but it can get a little bit squirrely.
Well, and if you think about it as a natural resource, one person wrote in and said, look, animals have a superior sense of eyesight, smell, hearing, and stuff over human beings.
Yeah.
Many animals, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to beat their senses as well. There are certain animals that are difficult to trap because they're so wary.
Coyotes can be pretty difficult to trap,
right.
in my experience.
So it's is it fair? Well, you're trying to outsmart them, and they're trying to outsmart you. It's all debatable. For those people who It is a little bit odd though for me to have someone have a dislike for baiting, but an acceptance of trapping. Okay, like you just mentioned to me, there's not a huge difference there for me, and I'd be curious to hear other people's comments on it. But more than that, you have many hunters feel that trapping and baiting should all be banned.
Yeah, which is weird the way I was raised.
And so that's a huge population, and it seems to grow. Like baiting seems to be out of favor, and trapping in a lot of not just non-hunting communities, but in hunting communities as well. Now, to me, again, we're ignoring the practical side of wildlife management,
right?
Of the world we live in, the real life world we live in. Which, to me, when you're dealing with trapping, let's take wolves in Idaho for example. Idaho Fish and Wildlife, the biologists have established quotas for how many wolves they want taken out of the wolf population every year, so that their elk herds and their deer herds and stuff and other animals are not wiped out.
And they have trappers trapping for the state, not just hunters.
And that's what I was about to say is when you go to the Fish and Wildlife, the Idaho Fish and Game or whatever website, and you look at the harvest rates, first of all, none of the quotas have ever been met.
Yeah.
So the goals that they have for harvests of wolves in Idaho have never been met since its inception.
Yeah.
Really. As far as I know, last I checked. So okay, so if you and then when you go there to the site, you know what you see is like 90% are taken by trapping.
Yeah.
And 10% of the quota currently of the animals being taken are taken by hunting. Mm-hmm. Okay? So if you decide you're going to eliminate trapping because you don't like it, wolves are going to go out of control.
Yeah, which they already are. It's just going to get worse.
Right? And so then what happens is you still trap them.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the Fish and Wildlife come in and they just do it. Instead of allowing the hunter to do it, you're just shifting it to a different group doing it. It's still being done. Yep. Wolves, cougars all over California, they're still being trapped.
Yep.
It's just not by us. Yep. And we're not, the dollars for that are, again, we're wasting a resource.
Right.
Out of some sort of antiquated, fair chase, ethics.
One of the things, the comments I've gotten from my friends is, when did it become so easy to kill something? Really, why don't you ask 50 of your friends how their season went on the western side of things? I don't really want to comment on the whitetail stuff because I'm just not involved in that, but on the western side of things, western hunting, mm-hmm. It's not like people are knocking them down every day. I mean, there are people, but right. I mean, as far, Facebook, it's Instagram, tough. You see, but yeah, I mean, I would consider myself a decent hunter. We got our asses kicked in North Idaho. And I mean, I had a shot and you had a shot. But it wasn't like, and we were in a spot where we knew the animals were and so on mm-hmm. and so forth. But, out of every, I would say, one person you see, there's 15 or 10 that came to Colorado and didn't get anything. So, I mean, actually we can figure it out. I mean, if it's 17% success ratio over the counter statewide, that means out of 10 people, 1.7 killed something. Mm-hmm. Technology isn't helping that much. Right. 1.7 sucks, right? Would you take that? I mean, would you bet $1,000 on a 1.7% chance of success or whatever, or 17%? Mm-hmm. It's just not that easy. And so, again, you said, and I agree, people do poo-poo on technology more, I think, than they probably should, because if technology was helping that much, you would have higher success rate. Now people can say, well, more animals are getting wounded because of technology because people overstep their ability. Mm-hmm. Well, that would mean the population would be dropping, and it's not. From what the numbers, the counts, fishing, all that, the numbers aren't really dropping. I mean, elk numbers are higher than they've ever been right now. Yeah. So I don't think, again, winter kill is a big one. way bigger than anything
Other
else.
factors increase tag allotments far more than technology.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And again, we police ourselves.
Yep.
We have the technology today to go and get 100% success rate. We don't employ it. We make it illegal to use it.
Yeah.
And in the name of fair chase and ethical hunting,
Yeah.
you know, and so for me, when we get back to this discussion about, you know, where do we draw the line? I look at it from the perspective of, are we meeting harvest quotas? Are hunters meeting those quotas? Are we using those resources and maximizing them to the fullest? And if you feel like, you know, if we're sitting here and we're going to say, okay, everybody has to do it the hardest way possible, we're ignoring the practical side of wildlife management.
No, for sure. And I'm trying to be a little bit more serious on this podcast and not crack jokes, just because of the overwhelming amount of feedback we got. 99% good. I mean, there was some dude that posted something about basically we're kids and dumb. I don't exactly know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Talking philosophy.
I mean,
of hunting.
basically, there are a few hardcore traditional guys that have been the most negative.
Yeah.
In regards to saying, you know, if you hunt with any other means, then you really don't get it.
Yeah, more or less.
You haven't figured out what hunting's all about. And so, anyway, that's just, I feel, again, goes back to, we can all police ourselves to a certain extent. If you want to make your archery season harder, you can go as far as a self bow and wooden arrows.
Yep.
You know, all the way from that to the most technologically advanced compound. You can do it yourself, or you can say, you know what, I don't bow hunt because it's just, I want to rifle hunt. That's what I do.
Yeah.
It's funny too. We did have a comment from a couple guys. One of them was from Australia, cool dude, and he just said, I'm confused because it seems like in the one episode you're saying recurves suck and you're extolling the virtues of rifles because they wound less, or because a recurve can wound more animals. And then in the next podcast, you're calling the rifle a cheater bar, and you're saying it's not ethical because it's so easy.
It really, all we were trying to get is, you pick up a gun, your chance of success is much higher than with a stick bow.
Yeah, it goes back down to fair chase, right?
Yeah.
When you talk fair chase, if you're giving the animal the greatest chance of escape,
Bring a self bow.
Yeah. Right? That's giving the animal the best chance of matching wits with you and escaping.
Yeah.
But also, the downside to that, and that's all we were saying, is the flip side to the self bow is, yeah, it's the ultimate fair chase option. It's also probably the highest wounding option.
Yeah.
Like percentage of shots taken to wounding.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So on the flip side of that, though, you have the rifle, which arguably 300 Win Mag, whatever, 30 outside, whatever it is, gives the animal the least chance of survival. You're out, you're shooting at 400 yards. How is it going to smell you, see you, detect you, hear you?
Right.
You're just not matching wits with it on the same level. So from a fair chase perspective, it's almost like flying a drone over it and sniping it with some, heat missile.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're a non-hunter standing back and looking at it, a gun seems really unfair.
Right.
Yeah.
So you take the gun thing, but on the flip side, the virtue of the gun generally is it's a very precision tool, and most likely to kill the animal fast and with one shot.
Humane. Yeah. And what got confusing was, we were talking about my own personal views for the most part, or our personal views of, not views, what we saw in one season of me shooting a stick bow and what could have happened if I had a compound or
based
gun.
On your vast years of experience shooting a compound.
Yeah, and some gun hunting. Yeah,
dude,
exactly.
I was at the range today with Snyder, and we were shooting bows. And Aron's groups at 50 yards are literally like just around the size of a silver dollar.
It's a different. I was trying to tell Clay Hayes
all of them
on and not.
And I'm shooting at 20 yards. me and 30 yards. I've got a pretty wide group. Your group is ridiculous.
I can shoot a compound really, really well. I mean, it's just
Precision.
I've just practiced
50 yards.
enough.
It was like a done deal.
I was
Dime heart shot.
I was in the X on a one spot, 3 out of 5 arrows, and the other 2 were in the white face, meaning like a Copenhagen lid. Obviously, with a stick bow, it's significantly.
I haven't seen you shoot a compound, so I've heard about it, but I saw it today, round after round, and I'm like, yeah, you're
yeah, I
lethal.
can shoot a compound, but what I'm getting at here, what I was going to say was like we did a technology podcast, and we're trying to. The first one was what I had witnessed and what I thought about, the season, shooting a stick, shooting a compound, whatever, and then we kind of went into where we weren't crapping on rifles. We were just being realistic to the fact that it's easier to kill stuff with a gun. And that's just straight up, the facts. I mean, that's just how it is. The first one was my experience and what I thought. The second one was just the simple truth of the matter. A gun is easier to kill. Mm-hmm. It's easier to kill with a gun.
And we like guns.
Yeah.
We also like stick bows.
Yeah.
I mean, I also like
shooting.
compounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
like shooting
the
everything.
fact is, we'll use all of them over time, over the years, when we want to get a different kind of experience from it.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, hunting is hunting. And whatever weapon I go with, a lot of guys that shoot a gun, and I have a great time. We shoot with guys that shoot a stick bow at the 3D course. We all get along great. I hunt with guys, shoot them all too.
Yeah.
But we also, maybe it seems like there's not a lot of high horse standing guys in our group of friends, meaning that we're pretty well, we're all very versatile and diverse in our thinking. And you definitely, with the internet, you get some guys that are again looking through the world in their own colored glasses. Yeah. Anyway, I'll stop talking because I think we've covered everything on our end. Let's all try and get along.
Yeah, I think
we even took notes for this one.
Yeah, we tried to organize our thoughts here a little bit.
Yeah.
One thing that I did like was I did like the idea of hunting with a recurve for certain reasons, right? For a month or whatever, like you can in Montana.
Yeah.
And the same in Idaho. Go through this archery season and you try to hunt and put the biggest challenge on yourself to get it done using the most primitive gear. But if you don't get it done, you can go back with a rifle during rifle season with the same tag, and then you can just go out and get, kill your animal and bring it home.
Right.
Now, certainly, it wasn't as fair chase. It wasn't as easy for the animal to escape, and it's and that's as easy as looking at harvest statistics. I mean, go in and look at harvest. Rifle hunts have like a 50% harvest success rate to like 80%. Bow hunts are 7 to 15.
Yeah.
I mean, so
whatever the number is, significantly higher.
There's a huge difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to have that argument because it's just silly.
Yeah.
Because the stats speak for themselves. That it's just easier with a rifle than a bow.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add to that was, so I do like that, go out with a bow, give yourself that experience. If you don't get it done, you go out and do the practical side of putting meat in your freezer and contributing to wildlife management by just going out and using a rifle to get a different experience, but to get the job done in a practical sense.
Yeah.
But as far as, I just want to make sure people understood too, with Joe and Steven, we're totally fans of both of those guys. And I don't believe that Ranella was, saying it was ethical or unethical.
He just didn't believe it was fair chase.
He just didn't think it was as fair chase.
And where I kind of was cracking jokes, which I would still crack them and I'm going to, is grab a recurve and put the gun down. Like,
yeah,
don't go too crazy with the whole that's not fair chase, but let me crank it with a 300 Win Mag, just because
Yeah, that's that standard of what technologies are okay, what trapping or baiting is okay versus what's not okay, and the diverse opinions that people have.
Yeah.
All we're saying is before you really embrace some of these opinions, you got to, I guess, look a little more deep
past the end of your nose on
yeah,
some
because
of the echo effect.
we're all looking through it through our own lens.
Yeah.
Try to see it through someone else's where they come from a different background or different perspective. I mean, it's you hear these guys down in Louisiana who talk about hunting whitetails in the swamps and the thick, and they're like, dude, if we don't use some kind of attractant
or bait, Texas, yeah,
they're like, good luck finding it, or South Texas.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of validity in that. And when you come from the West in wide open spaces,
yeah,
it's a lot easier to spot and stalk an animal out here than it is to do so in the thick jungles of.
Well, and I don't know that there wouldn't be a whole lot of blacktails dying without the help of apples in certain areas. That's just a fact. I'm not saying. I mean, it's as horrible as this to say. In my younger days, the largest blacktails I had heard of getting shot were off someone's garage when the safety light came on for it to eat apples. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how the big ones got shot. I'm not agreeing with that. Obviously, it's illegal, but it's hard enough to shoot them even when you're cheating, let alone when you're not cheating. And so, technology isn't really helping that much technology only goes so far, So.
Yeah, when it comes to those things, it's very. We all judge from our own perspective, from the place we are from and what we know. But until we quote unquote walk a mile in another man's shoes, moccasins, whatever, it's a little harder to.
Till you walk another man's crispy boots that are bright orange. Look at those.
Those are handsome, dude.
Yeah, they're bright.
I'm not gonna lie. I have boot envy.
Yeah, these came in today. Not to make this a crispy sales pitch, but I've been waiting for these to come in. This is the closer to final version of the prototype set I tested during hunting season, and we ran up to Fire Road with 45 pounds today, and no heel rub. They've been great.
Brand new.
They are brand new, which is, this is the first day I wore them and no heel rub. The only reason why I brought it up is they are so bright. I keep looking down at them as we're on the podcast because they are super orange.
They are, but I kind of like them that way. And so far the feedback has been solid too.
Well, Amy's pumped because they're Broncos orange, right? Even though we suck this year, they are orange, which is good. That's her favorite color. So
yeah.
Anyhow, we should probably wrap this up. But, definitely, viewers, don't be afraid like you're doing to post up your thoughts. And, if it's going to be a negative kind of crappy comment, don't post it up. It does not benefit anyone. But we love all of the questions, comments, things like that. It's great, as well as the text and messages.
And we're learning, too. Like, a lot of the comments, pointed out some of our thoughts and, kind of some of the things that we said. You're like, really? Like, technology doesn't impact harvest rates? Come on now. And it's, it's not quite what we meant to say.
What we meant, just to make it clear, is technology could really impact, but since we police ourselves, the current technology isn't really impacting it much.
And as long as we continue to police ourselves, like we do with drones, like we do with night vision, like we do with a lot of things, I just don't see the fear of technology shouldn't be such a thing, because we as a community continue to say, nah, we don't like that. It's too easy.
Especially on the Western hunting side of things. Again, if it was that easy, everybody would be coming home with an elk in the back of the truck.
Well, and if there were deer running around like rabbits here, there might be a few other laws in place, like use as many feeders and night vision options as you want. They're running rampant. But again, it's a resource, and we want to manage those and harvest those as best we can. As fair chase and ethically as we can. But at the end of the day, there's just a certain quota that needs to be met. And I love it because I was doing research the other day. There's 300 million pounds of deer meat that is harvested annually in the United States.
Yeah.
That's a lot of meat, bro.
Yeah, that is.
And when you think of it from just extracting that as just a simple extraction from the wild,
Mm-hmm.
one way or another, that 300 million pounds gets into the U.S., freezers. And when that happens, whether you use a high-powered rifle or a stick bow.
Yeah.
And as long as we're meeting those quotas, how we do it, I think, is more of a self-imposed method among hunters.
Yeah.
And then hopefully, as people get more passionate about hunting, they continue to grow in their passion for the outdoors and maybe challenge themselves more and more in that chase.
Yeah, which I think this year I'm going to challenge myself slightly less on some of the hunts, and I'm going to grab the compound with a 7-pin sight and a slider.
Dude, it's going to be a little different hunting with Aron this year because after seeing you shoot 110 yards with the recurve and nail that center, I'm just like, somebody made that comment too, like the way compounds work today, a guy can be as efficient now with a compound as a guy was 20 years ago with a muzzleloader.
Yeah, which I'd agree with that. Yeah.
And I would agree too. Again, that technology has grown and increased, but you yourself can self-impose and shoot a recurve instead.
Yeah.
But if you choose not to,
so be it. And the thing is I've proven after this year, not that but I mean, I'm going to shoot something, whether I got a freaking atlatl, well, maybe not an atlatl, but a recurve or a compound. It may happen a little quicker, one or the other, but we filled most of the tags this year with a recurve, and I usually fill them with a compound. Not speaking that as far as arrogantly, but we were able to get it done with the recurve. We're able to get it done normally with a compound as well, no matter how far I can shoot. Sometimes it is nicer to not have to struggle quite so much. Especially if you
there's
have
a certain balance of enjoyment for the outdoors versus just grinding. And
I can go take pictures all year round with my camera out in the woods. So sometimes you just don't have as much, some people don't have as much time to take an animal and fill their freezer as others. And you can't really bash that guy for saying, I'm going to use every resource I have at my disposal.
Available.
Technology.
Yeah. For me, I look at it from the perspective of I have a hard enough time killing an animal with a compound. I don't really need to add, I've said this before, I don't really need to add complexity or difficulty to my hunt. It's already hard enough.
Man, it's hard for everybody. That's why a lot of buddies of mine texted me today and they were like, when did it become so easy shooting an elk? Because it's not. I mean,
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I was thoroughly, and Aron can attest to this, thoroughly distraught and devastated, upset, frustrated by not killing an elk this year.
Yeah.
And it just.
And we worked hard, harder than most. It wasn't like we were hunting by camp. We were the only guys backpacking in, so on and so forth.
Wet from head to toe.
Yep.
Waist deep, crossing streams. It sucked.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And that was with a compound.
Yeah.
So adding a recurve to it, I couldn't do it. I didn't get it done with the compound.
Yeah.
Adding a recurve to it would have just made it even that much harder. So until I'm slaying them every year with a compound, I'm not ready to do the next level. And the same thing with the rifle. There's guys out there who just aren't getting it done with a rifle.
Yeah.
They don't want to add a compound to the mix.
I mean, honestly, some units here, it would be hard on that third season over-the-counter rifle tag. Mm-hmm. Rifle or not, you got to work. There's no way around it. But anyway, we should probably cut this thing off.
Yep. Well, cool, man. This is good.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Stay gritty and stay positive.
In 1907, only 41,000 elk remained in North America. And in 1950, only 12,000 pronghorn remained. Today, there are more than 1 million elk and 1.1 million pronghorn. Why? Because hunting is conservation. In 1937, hunters actually requested an 11% tax on guns, ammo, bows, and arrows to help fund conservation. That tax so far raised more than $8 billion for wildlife conservation. Altogether, hunters pay more than $1.6 billion a year for conservation programs. No one gives more. It's obvious that hunters care about animals, and yet we actively hunt and kill them. Many people cannot understand this dichotomy. How can we both care about animals and also kill them? It's a question that I challenge all of you to consider. Here is an excerpt from the Gritty Bowman film, Alberta, with a quote from Fred Bear that describes my feelings on this subject. The first shot on this buck was fatal, and it cleanly pierced his vitals, but he didn't go down. I hate to see animals suffer, and when possible, I will always shoot them again if I have the opportunity. I have tremendous respect for this buck and his will to survive. He didn't go down easy, and I have mixed emotions about that. At times like this, I am reminded of a quote by Fred Bear, which somewhat describes my thoughts on this matter. Quote, I have always tempered my killing with respect for the game pursued. I see the animal not only as a target, but as a living creature with more freedom than I will ever have. I take that life if I can, with regret as well as joy, and with the sure knowledge that nature's way of fang and claw and starvation are a far crueler fate than I bestow. I do not hunt for the joy of killing, but for the joy of living, and the inexpressible pleasure of mingling my life, however briefly, with that of a wild creature that I respect, admire, and value. We can argue as much as we like, but the fact is, hunting is man's oldest and most successful try at life. Every human being is alive today because our ancestors hunted. So it's a relatively new phenomenon for people to regard hunting as a cruel and frivolous activity that has no worth outside of personal gratification for the hunter. The funny thing is, hunting has increased my appreciation for wild animals and wild places, not decreased it. And as I watch society lose its ties to wildlife and conservation, I feel my bond with nature grow ever stronger in direct correlation to my time spent hunting. I understand now more than ever that hunting is the greatest hope for creating the next generation of true conservationists. Never stop sharing your passion for hunting in the outdoors. Our wild animals and wild places depend on it. We thank Kifaru, Mountain Ops, Hoyt, Vortex, Phelps Game Calls, Black Eagle Arrows, and Crispy Boots for supporting the Gritty Bowman. We love these companies and the people behind them. They truly make fantastic products. Please support them however you can. As always, good luck on your hunts and stay gritty.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowman.
Gritty Bowman.